My family banned me from being with my boyfriend because he wasn't from the right circle. Now they want forgiveness, but I want nothing to do with him. My family decided my boyfriend wasn't up to their standards. It didn't matter that he treated me well, that I felt happy, that we had something real. What mattered to them was that he wasn't from the right circle. He didn't have the connections they valued. He didn't fit into their narrow vision of what was appropriate for their daughter. The moment I introduced him, they already had their judgment formed. It wasn't about him. It was about the image they had in their minds for my life. It all came to a head the night they told me. I remember sitting at the dinner table, fork in hand, trying to enjoy my meal, but I could feel the tension hanging in the air. The conversation had been light earlier, but then it shifted. My dad, who always kept his cool, put down his glass and looked at me. I could see the seriousness in his eyes. "We need to talk about your relationship," he said, the words coming out like an order rather than a request. I paused, not because I didn't know what was coming, but because I didn't know how to respond. I'd been expecting this conversation for a while now, but when it finally came, I didn't realize how much it would sting. "You know," my dad continued, "we've been thinking about this a lot, and we just don't think he's the right fit for you." My mom chimed in next, her voice soft, but with the same tone. "It's not that we don't like him, honey. It's just that we think you deserve someone better. Someone who can offer you more. Someone who has the same kind of background." I could feel my stomach tighten, the frustration building up. It wasn't about who I was with. It wasn't about whether or not he was a good person. It was about their perception of what was acceptable, and I was clearly failing their test. "I'm happy with him," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He treats me well. Why isn't that enough?" "It's not about that," my dad said, cutting me off. "It's about stability. It's about ensuring that you're with someone who shares the same values. Someone who has the right connections, who fits in with the life we've built for you." And that was it. They weren't talking about love. They weren't talking about what made me happy. They were talking about status, image, and keeping everything in their comfortable, predictable bubble. "I'm sorry, but I'm not going to just throw him away because he doesn't fit your image of what's right," I said, my voice finally breaking through the tension. "Then you'll have to make a choice," my dad said. His tone didn't change. It was clear this wasn't a discussion. "If you choose him, you're choosing him over us. You'll have to live with that." I felt a sharp pang in my chest. I didn't want to lose my family, but I also couldn't lose myself. I knew what they wanted me to do, but I couldn't go down that path. I didn't want to live my life based on their expectations anymore. They wanted me to choose their version of happiness, not mine. "I choose him," I said without hesitation. "I'm not going to choose you over him." There was silence at the table after I said those words. It was like the air got thicker, and the weight of everything shifted in an instant. I could see the disappointment in their eyes, but it didn't stop me. They weren't going to control my choices anymore. "You're making a mistake," my mom said quietly, but I could tell she was hurt. "We're just looking out for you." "I'm not making a mistake," I replied, the words coming out clearer now. "I'm making the decision that's right for me." They didn't know how to respond to that. My dad's face didn't show any emotion, but I could tell he was angry. My mom looked like she wanted to say more, but she couldn't find the words. "I'm moving out," I said, standing up from the table. "I'm not going to keep living here and pretending like everything's fine. Don't come crawling back when this blows up in your face," my dad warned. I didn't reply. I grabbed my things, walked out, and didn't look back. The next few days were a blur. I moved in with him, but the reality of cutting ties with my family set in. I had made my choice, and now I had to live with the consequences. There were moments when I wondered if I had done the right thing, but it wasn't about what was right anymore. It was about what was true for me. And as much as it hurt to walk away from the people I had known my whole life, I knew it was the only thing I could do. I wasn't going to live a life shaped by someone else's expectations. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. A few weeks later, my family came knocking. They wanted to make things right. They wanted an apology from me. I couldn't believe it. They hadn't even tried to understand why I had made the choices I did. It was then that I realized that nothing would ever be the same. They had pushed me too far. And this time, I wasn't going to be the one to back down. I had made my decision, and they would have to accept it. The days after I made my decision were a strange mix of relief and tension. On one hand, I felt like I was finally living on my terms, making choices for myself. On the other, I felt the weight of my family's rejection pressing down on me. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but it certainly wasn't the complete silence that followed. At first, I thought it might be temporary. I assumed they'd cool off, see reason, and eventually come around. Maybe they just needed time to process everything. I was wrong. Weeks went by, and they didn't reach out. They didn't call. They didn't text. It was as if I no longer existed to them. And, for a while, that was fine. I told myself that I didn't need them. I had made my choice, and now I was living with it. But that didn't mean I wasn't affected. Every day, I lived with the consequences of that choice. I couldn't call my mom to check in. I couldn't talk to my dad about anything. My life with them, the life I had known, was gone. And every time I picked up my phone and saw their numbers, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. Then, one day, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. My first instinct was to ignore it, but for some reason, I didn't. I picked up. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It was my mom. I could tell immediately by the tightness in her voice that this wasn't just a casual call. She was serious. She was trying to sound calm, but I knew better. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure what to say. After all, she had been the one to shut me out. She had been the one who told me I couldn't have a life outside their control. But I wasn't going to say all that now. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into backing down. "I'm listening," I said, my voice still steady but not friendly. I wasn't going to let her off easy. "We just want to fix things," she continued. "We've had time to think, and we realized we were wrong. We just want you to come home. We're sorry for the way we treated you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For weeks, I had been on my own. For weeks, I had lived without them. And now they wanted to pretend like everything could just go back to the way it was. "I'm not coming home," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I made my decision. I'm not changing that just because you decided to come around." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could tell she was struggling to find the words, trying to put together something that would make me change my mind. "You don't understand," she said after a long pause. "We're your family. We love you. This isn't about him, it's about us. We just want you to be happy, and we thought we were doing what was best for you." "By telling me who I could be with?" I asked. "By telling me I wasn't allowed to love who I wanted. That's what's best for me." She didn't have an answer to that. There was another pause, a long one. Then, she said something that surprised me. "I know we made mistakes. But can't we try to fix this? I'm asking for your forgiveness." I didn't know what to say. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about them making up for their mistakes. It was about the fact that they had done this in the first place. They had chosen their idea of what was best for me over what I actually wanted, and they had pushed me out when I didn't comply. "No," I said, my voice flat. "I don't need your forgiveness. What I need is for you to respect my decision. I'm asking you to come back," she repeated, this time with a little more desperation in her voice. "This doesn't have to be the end. I already made my choice," I said, "and I'm not going back." That was the moment I realized something. They weren't just asking for forgiveness. They were asking me to undo everything I had done, to take back the steps I had taken to move forward. They wanted me to go back to being the person they could control, the person who would listen to them without question. And I wasn't going to do that. Not anymore. "I can't do that," I said. "I'm done trying to please you. I'm living my life for me now." There was a long silence, and then she said, "I don't know what to say anymore." "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "I'm done. You can't just pretend like everything is fine because you suddenly decided to fix things. You don't get to decide when I come back into your life. That's not how it works." I hung up the phone, but for a moment, I just stood there, holding it in my hand. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt done. The conversation wasn't going to change anything. They had already made their decision, and now so had I. This was it. I went about my day, trying to distract myself from the weight of it all. I didn't think about it much. But it wasn't long before the knock on the door came. I was expecting it. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came to my apartment, trying to force their way back into my life. When I opened the door, there they were. My mom and dad. "Can we talk?" my dad asked, his voice quieter than before. His tone was different, like he was trying to approach this with some level of humility. I don't think there's anything left to talk about, I said, my voice steady but firm. I made my choice. We know, he said, and we respect that. But his words didn't mean anything. Not after everything they had put me through. Not after they had told me that if I made this choice, I would be out of their lives forever. We're sorry, my mom added, her voice soft. But we don't want to lose you. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know if I could respond. The truth was, I had already lost them. And I wasn't going to keep fighting for something that wasn't real. I'm not going back, I said. I'm not going to apologize for making my own decisions. This is my life. You can either accept it or not. But I'm not going to keep pretending. They stood there in silence for a moment, both of them looking at me like they didn't know who I was anymore. But that was the truth. I wasn't the same person I had been. I had changed, and they hadn't accepted it. I guess we'll just go then, my dad said finally, his voice resigned. And just like that, they turned and left. No more pleading. No more apologies. I closed the door behind them and stood there for a moment, taking it all in. It wasn't the end. I knew that. There was still a lot to process. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't living for anyone else anymore. After the last conversation with my parents, things went quiet again. They didn't come back to my apartment. They didn't call. At first, I thought they'd give up, let things settle, but I had made my peace with that. I wasn't going to chase them anymore. I wasn't going to beg them to understand or explain myself. I had made my choice, and they had made theirs. I moved on. Life with him felt real. There were moments of happiness, of course. But even then, there was always this little voice in the back of my head asking if I'd made the right decision. Could I really live the rest of my life without my family? Would I always have this tension, this gap between the life I'd been given and the one I had chosen for myself? The uncertainty didn't go away. I wasn't sure if I had done the right thing. It was hard to be sure. But every time I thought about going back, about trying to rebuild something with them, I remembered how they had treated me. How they had made me feel like I was lesser because I loved someone they didn't approve of. I couldn't go back to that. I couldn't keep pretending it didn't hurt. One day, I got a call. The number was unrecognized, but it was late, and I figured it could wait. Then I got a message. It wasn't from my mom or dad directly, but from a family friend. She was always the one they called when things needed smoothing over, when someone had to play the mediator. I should have ignored it, but something made me open the message. Your mom is really upset. She wants to see you. Please call her. I stared at the screen for a while. My mom had made it clear that if I chose him, I was out. She had been so firm, so sure of her position, and now she was upset? She wanted me back? I wasn't sure what they expected. I thought about it for a few minutes. I didn't want to go back to their world. I didn't want to walk back into the chaos they had caused. But the idea of them being upset, it bothered me. I didn't like the idea that I was the one who had broken everything. And I didn't know if it was guilt or something else, but I texted back. I'm not going back. It's over. I didn't expect that to be the end of it. The days that followed were quieter. No more calls. No more texts. It was as if I had made my point, and they had accepted it, at least for now. The silence settled into something I could live with. But of course, it wasn't over. I knew better than to think that. A few weeks later, there was a knock on the door. I didn't recognize the voice at first. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not after the last time they came around. But when I opened the door, it was my dad. My stomach sank. The sight of him standing there, looking like he hadn't figured out what to say, hit me harder than I expected. Can we talk? He asked, his voice a little softer than usual. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to revisit everything I had already made clear. But I opened the door wider, letting him in. I wasn't going to be cold, but I wasn't going to make this easy for him, either. What is it? I asked, trying to sound neutral, but even I could hear the sharpness in my tone. I know you're upset with us, he said, walking into the living room like he'd done so many times before. I just want to say that I'm sorry for how everything went down. I shouldn't have reacted the way I did. I should have listened to you. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't interested in apologies anymore. I wasn't interested in hearing them tell me they were wrong if they hadn't actually learned anything from it. I don't need an apology, I said flatly. What's done is done. You made your choice. And now I've made mine. My dad sighed, sitting down on the couch. His hands were folded in front of him, and I could see the frustration in his eyes. I wasn't giving him what he wanted. I wasn't giving him the closure he was looking for. He wanted me to come around. He wanted me to say everything was okay, but it wasn't. I don't know if you'll ever forgive us, he said after a long pause, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. And I want to fix things. You're our daughter. I shouldn't have pushed you away. The words didn't land the way they used to. They didn't have the same power over me anymore. I wasn't that girl who needed to hear my father say sorry to feel like everything was okay. It wasn't about an apology anymore. It was about what they had done, how they had made me feel small, how they thought they could dictate my life. You can't just fix it with a few words, I said, the frustration in my voice finally breaking through. You can't just pretend everything is fine now because you decided to show up. There was another silence between us, the kind that filled the room with something heavier than the conversation itself. I could see how much he wanted me to tell him it was going to be okay, how badly he wanted to fix this. But I couldn't. I couldn't go back to pretending. Not for him. Not for anyone. You made it clear that if I chose him, I was on my own, I continued. And I did. And now you want me to come back and act like everything's fine? Like you didn't make me choose? Like you didn't treat me like I was wrong for loving someone you didn't approve of? I didn't want to hurt you, he said, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice now. I just thought I knew better. I don't need you to know what's best for me anymore, I said, standing up. I couldn't sit through this anymore. I had heard it all before. I'm not going to keep going in circles with you. I'm living my life the way I want to. And if you can't accept that, then I guess this is it. He stood up slowly, his face a mix of disappointment and something else, maybe guilt, maybe regret. But it didn't matter anymore. His disappointment didn't change anything. His regret didn't make a difference. He walked to the door and stopped before he left. I hope you'll reconsider, he said softly. But I knew it was over. The door clicked shut behind him, and I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. I wasn't going to change my life to fit into someone else's vision of it. And I knew, for better or worse, that I was finally living on my own terms.